Okay, live on Facebook. Okay, we're live on Facebook and recording. So we're going to get started because I'm very much about starting things on time, changing the paradigm in the devotee culture. So today we have with us Gurunishta, and I'm really excited to have him as our modern day sage. We're doing this series, The Beauty and Messiness of the Sadhaka's Journey, interviews with modern day sages. And I want to read a little bio just to start with, just give you a little history of Gurunishta's life. So Gurunishta was born into an atheistic upper middle class family in central Finland in the late 70s. Religion had absolutely no part in his family, but from early on, questions about the meaning of life tormented him. On his 18th birthday, he found Srila Prabhupada's books and became a devotee. And then 6 years later, he met Swami Tripurari in Finland and knew immediately that he had found his guru. So Gurunishta got initiated in 2004. He moved to Audarya in January of 2005. He helped build the Audarya temple and pioneered Madhuban during the first wave of its development. He managed Audarya off and on after more brahmacharis joined around 2007, and he was involved in training up the new monastics. After being a monk for close to 7 years, he got married to Swami's close disciple, Vrindaranya, in 2011. And after moving out and returning to Audarya several times to help out with the management, Vrindaranya and Gurunishta sold their home in Santa Cruz Mountains and bought half of Audarya in 2018. They continue to live and serve at Audarya to this day, working full-time for Swami's Darshan Press, publishing house, and doing other services that the ashram requires. Some of the things that Gurunishta enjoys doing are singing bhajans, cooking milk sweets for Sri Sri Gaura-Nityananda, creative writing, and drawing devotional comics for the Harmonist online magazine. Prompted by his Guru Maharaj's request, his latest project is studying the Gaudiya scriptures and giving classes on them. So that's great. So Gurunishta has told me that he has a lot to say, so I'm going to be quiet today. I'm not going to make so many comments, and I'm going to just let him jump into it. We are kind of looking at the hero's journey, the Sadhaka's journey compared to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and I know you're well aware of that. So the first aspect would be to kind of what the call and your departure from the world, and then the second would be your initiation into a new world, and your teachers and guides and mantras and all the things that empowered you to make progress in your spiritual journey. And then the return, which many of us may not actually have a complete understanding of that yet because we're still in progress. So, but we are able to share a lot of what we've garnered over the last some years. So there is some of that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Gurunishta, and you can start with your departure and what was the call and how did it come?
Right. Thank you for that. And pranams to all the devotees here. And Kishore always, I mean, not Kishore, Prigo always says that if you feel comfortable, if you could turn on the video, that'd be really nice, because then I feel like I'm talking to you directly. That'll make me perhaps more inspired to say things that would be not said otherwise. And so I would like to start with saying that my Sadhaka story is going to explode a lot of these like common mythical ideas about what spiritual life is and is supposed to be. And there's been so many obstacles and a lot of struggle and hardship. And there's this kind of persistent idea in the West, I would say, especially in the New Age circles, that spiritual life is supposed to be easy. And if you think about the book The Secret, for example, the idea is that the more spiritual you are, the more there's going to be money and influence and women and men and beautiful cars coming your way, and everything's going to be just, you know, rainbows and unicorns. But really, the fact is, it's quite the opposite. If you really try to surrender, at least my experience has been that the more you try to surrender, the harder and the messier things are going to get. And because you go against the material stream. And so I heard that Gauranga Priya was thinking about putting together this book of like compiling all the parts from the Bhagavatam where the sadhakas or devotees struggle. And I thought that was a great idea, because I think it's really important to emphasize that there will be struggle. Like, don't expect spiritual life to be easy, because it's not going to be easy. And like Krishna is going to test us a lot. And the more we try to leave behind our material nature and material conditioning, the more it's going to sort of fight back. And so I've certainly seen that in my life. And then if you think about like Prabhupada, for example, or what to speak of like our Guru Maharaj, he's had so many obstacles. Ever since he left ISKCON, it was one obstacle after another, and he just keeps pushing through. And that's really the beauty of like surrender, is like you don't judge things by what's pleasant and what's unpleasant, but you judge them by how you can surrender more and how you can go forward towards Krishna, no matter how hard it is. And that being said, I was thinking I should probably start my journey with talking a little bit about my childhood, my background. So like Archana-siddhi mentioned in that bio, I was born into a well-to-do family, and my parents were both college educated, and they very much had this mindset of like science. And well, they had been communists when they were in college, so that really kind of like informed a lot of their political views, especially their views about religion. And so religion was not only like a neutral thing or something they didn't think about, but it was actually something that they actively resisted and really hated when it came down to it. And so that was the environment that I was born into. And of course, I took it like a sponge, like kids do, you know, their environment. And I just went along with that. But the thing was that I was not like a normal kid. I started having these like existential crises when I was 5 years old. I remember my mom was reading me this book by this awesome Swedish author called Astrid Lindgren. And she has this one book called Brothers Lionheart that's basically all about reincarnation. It's a, you know, fantasy story, but really the framework is like reincarnation. These two brothers, they keep dying, and then they go to this special like fantasy realm, and then they die again and they go to the next realm. And I was like 5 years old, and my mom was reading that book to me in the evenings, and I like got like, wow, like this is true, like we're just gonna keep going on and on forever like this. And I was just crying like night after night. I was like, I can't be stuck in this thing. And I knew somehow that sounded like that was how the world functioned. But of course, my parents had absolutely they couldn't console me in any way, because they were atheists, and they had nothing to say to it. And they were like, no, it's just a story. I'm like, no, that's not just a story. It's real life for you. And so from then on, I just always felt like life was not working out. Like there's something I hadn't figured out about life, and it was not working out. Like there's something that was not functioning properly. And when I became a teenager, I started like looking for answers. I started reading these like existential philosophers like Nietzsche and Camus, and then I got into anarchism, I got into punk rock, I got into all this like alternative youth culture, because I felt like maybe they had some better answers, because they were going against the mainstream that I felt all along that never really worked for me. But it didn't really like, I didn't get these like good solid answers. It was like a little bit, you know, some good idea here, some good idea there, but it didn't feel like it was this whole package and this clear explanation of how things actually were and why it wasn't working for me. And so I kept doing I joined bands since I was 12. That was kind of the whole thing that we did. You know, we were like the punks of the local town, and then we'd form different bands and play and do songs, write songs about the, you know, all the bad things in the world, and like try to kind of sort it out by expressing it through music. I guess that's what we were doing. And then, but the kind of like the existential anxiety just kept amping up. I found some Buddhist text, and then I went from anarchism and all that like atheistic stuff to like alternative spirituality. So there's like Buddhism, shamanism, and like Carlos Castaneda, and I got something out of it, but it didn't really like fully like work for me either. And then I remember just before I turned 18, it really peaked for me, the whole existential like crisis, big time. And I was like praying to my journal. I was like, just where are you, God? Like, why are you playing these games with me? Like, why can't you just show me? I was just really like trying to, as sincerely as I could, say like, I need help, and why are you not helping me? And then, you know, nothing seemed to happen. And I was like, oh well, I kind of forgot about it a little bit. And then just a week after that, I was riding my bike to home from my girlfriend's place, and I stopped by the grocery store. And just when I pulled up to the grocery store, this like extremely round-faced, happy-looking, chubby guy, looked like the Buddha, you know, the laughing Buddha for the Chinese Buddha. He came up to me with this huge smile on his face, and he didn't say anything, but he grabbed the handlebar of my bike. And I was like, what the hell's the matter with this guy? Like in Finland, especially, you just don't do that kind of thing. Like Finnish people, social distancing has nothing to do with the pandemic in Finland. Everybody's just like staying away from others. So I was like, what is this guy doing? But he had this like aura about him. I was like, I liked him at the same time. It was a weird feeling. And so then he had a book in the other hand, and he like kind of held it up and was like, are you interested in yoga? And I said, yeah, actually I am, because I'd been reading some stuff about yoga as well. And he was really surprised because, you know, central Finland, like small town Finland, you don't actually a lot of times get that response. So then he was like, oh, really? I think you'd really like this book. And he got all amped up, and his smiles just went higher and higher. And so then I started coming up with excuses. He said, I'm a monk from the Helsinki temple. And oh, okay, interesting, you know, but I wasn't really interested in it. So he was trying to really like sell the book to me, and I came up with excuses like, oh, I don't have any money, although I was just about to go to the grocery store. And oh, I don't have any money on me. And then somehow it came out that I knew this guy Yanni, who I just had started to play in a band with, who was into shelter, and he was a kind of like on and off devotee. And so he found out about that, and he was so happy. He was like, oh, you can pay through him, no problem. You don't have to pay now. And to be honest with you, I still haven't paid for the book, so I should probably go to the Helsinki temple and give him $5 or something next time I go to Finland. So anyway, so he gave me the book, and I took it, and I was like, yeah, I'm never gonna read this. You know, the devotee who played in my band, he'd taken us to the Helsinki temple once when we went to record this demo in Helsinki, and we were like not impressed. The rest of us, we were just like these like teenage punks, just making fun of him and all the quirks of the devotees and all the imported, you know, funny cultural quirks and stuff. And so I kind of knew about the devotees, and I didn't feel like they had anything to give me, which is so funny. I was so arrogant like that. But so I just like went home, and I threw the book in some random pile of some stuff. You know how, you know, teenage boys' rooms, they are what they are. And so I assumed I'd never see the book again. But then on my 18th birthday, I was like lying in my bed, completely bored out of my mind. And I just like reached out my hand like this, kind of like blindly, to whatever first thing hit my hand, and it was the book. And it was this book of transcribed morning walks of Prabhupada when he used to walk in the Los Angeles on the beach and give these talks. And the book was called The Science of Life, and it was all about how materialistic science is completely unable to explain what life is actually about, and how they, the stuff that Prabhupada would talk a lot about. And so I started reading it slowly. I wasn't catching that much of it at first, but then he started talking about the nature of consciousness. And I had some kind of like Jan Samaskar from probably from my previous lives. It was kind of coming out before I became also a devotee. And so that kind of talk about consciousness and matter and the difference between conscious and matter, it really caught my attention. And so I started like getting more into the book. And the more I read, I just like all of a sudden like was gorging on the book. It was this intense feeling of like, this is the best stuff I've ever read. This is what I've been looking for. And the more I read, I was like, oh my God, like this person like is like practically speaking in my words that I, how Guru Maharaj says sometimes, how like the guru says things that you always felt, but you can't put to words. That was my experience with Prabhupada. And then finally, he started talking about Krishna, and he made the connection between consciousness and then that there's this like the conglomerate of consciousness, like the total consciousness, that's Krishna, and there's a way to connect with that consciousness. And it just absolutely blew my mind, and like tears started like flowing from my eyes. I was just like, it was the feeling of relief. I'd never felt that kind of relief. Like my whole life up until my 18th birthday, I'd felt like nothing made sense. And then all of a sudden I get this book that's like everything about it makes perfect sense. It was this like feeling of like every single thing falling in place and all these connections like shooting out from me, that like everything was in order, like all of a sudden. And I just like started writing to my journal. I was like saying like, oh my God, like you actually responded. Like, I can't believe you actually got back to me. This connection is working, And I could hardly write because tears were just like pouring out of my eyes. And so I kept reading, and I was just in this completely altered state of mind. I was feeling like this intense bliss and relief. And like a whole week after that, I was in this altered state of mind. And it felt like what the actual experience of it for me was that I was like sitting in the audience and watching at this like puppet show of material existence playing in front of my eyes. And I felt completely detached from it. It was just kind of humorous, and like it just didn't touch me. And so in my like newcomers, my utsahamai, I thought, okay, this is gonna the way I'm gonna live the rest of my life. And I'm just gonna be beamed up to Golok Vrindavan by the end of this life. It didn't quite work out like that. And of course, what happens is like you get that, when you reconnect with your old bhakti samskars, you get that like punch in the face, like it's amazing. And you think that's going to be it. But then your material conditioning after that initial thing starts coming back, and then you come down from it and oh yeah, okay, that's where I'm actually at. And unfortunately, that's what happened to me. And so I was back, but at least it was such a different experience still after that, because I knew that there was a structure and there was that life actually made sense. And so I came back from that amazing week-long trip, but at least I knew that life that it made sense. And that I had a way of like connecting with that conglomerate, that like whatever you would call it, the over consciousness that's called Krishna. And I had a name for it. I had a sadhana for it. I started chanting. And I wanted to become a monk because I figured that, I wanted to take it all away. But the thing was, I did not feel comfortable with the Helsinki ISKCON temple. They were, even for the 90s scale, they were extremely fanatical. So it says something about how fanatical they were. And so like every time I went there, they tried to make me join and basically hit the street with a stack of books. And I couldn't relate to that. I didn't relate to that kind of like uber evangelical approach. And so I kept my distance. I had connections with the monks, but I always kept my distance because I didn't want to be pulled into that kind of like fanatical, a little like cultish thing. And so instead, I just kind of continued my band stuff, but I kept a pretty strict sadhana by myself. Like I had no association, but I kept chanting mostly 16 rounds a day, and I was reading every day because I just really loved chanting and studying philosophy. And the monks would always come. They would sometimes visit my hometown, and they'd be like, "But you're all alone. Like, what are you doing here?" Like, and I said, "Well, I'm just doing my sadhana." They were like really surprised that I kept my a strict sadhana without any association, because I guess it wasn't that normal. It wasn't their experience. But it was just, for me, it was just like I didn't do it to. Um, I just did it because I really, really enjoyed it. For me, it was like the lifeline that I had to keep doing, because otherwise nothing really had any meaning. That's how I felt. But then, because I couldn't surrender, I because I couldn't become a monk, so then I kept doing the band stuff on the side, and I couldn't like either. I was kind of like stalling my material life because I didn't want to get more entangled. So I was in this total like catch-22. Like I couldn't surrender, but I didn't want to get more entangled either. And so I kind of kept doing the band thing and just being completely stalled in my life. And then I started this one band called On the Solid Rock that was basically my personal project at first. And it's funny because now that I look back to the lyrics, almost every single lyric of that band was kind of like praying to be able to surrender. There's this one song, for example, it's called Paralyzed on the Path to Freedom. And one of the lines is that it says that I envy those people who accidentally burn down their homes. So like I was kind of like praying for this disaster that would like burn my home, or like this flood that would just like throw me in some other place that I couldn't go back to my material life anymore. But I couldn't like actually do that, surrender. And I didn't know who to surrender to because I hadn't found my guru. And so I just kept stalling and stalling and stalling. But then finally, when I was 23, so I did that for 5 years. And then finally, when I was 23, I decided, well, I guess I have to, it's not looking like I'm going to be able to surrender in this life. So I guess I better get going. And then Kamalaksha got me to his graphic design art school through the back door. And that's when I found my material calling. Like I became like overnight, like an art fanatic. It just hit me so intensely. I just completely dove into it. I kept doing my sadhana, but I kind of like, religion kind of became art became my religion, and then religion became my hobby. And so that's what I did then. I mean, I hung out every single night at Kamalaksha and Krishangi's place, and we would just like play Chinese board games and talk about art all night. And they would cook like this amazing Indian prasadam, and we'd eat and just like get these crazy art ideas and do some weird little trips. And you know how those guys are, like there's never a dull moment with them. That's what it was like. We just all out, just like avant-garde, publishing house craziness. And that was materially speaking probably the happiest time of my life. But what had happened was, the very first semester when I went to that school, Kamalaksha was not there for the 2 first weeks because him and Krishangi were in California on their honeymoon. And so they came back, and then they were like, you know what, we got initiated. And I was like, what? Like, it was the craziest thing for me, because I always thought they were like me, like Krishna consciousness was like the basis of their life, but they were not going to go that far in this life as to surrender and go for that more serious thing. And I was really surprised. And I was like, and then they explained how it happened. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I'd actually heard about Tripurari Maharaj at that point because I was subscribed to his Sanga newsletter. But for some reason, the Sanga newsletter never really caught my faith. Like I kept reading it, but it was a little too like maybe academic or something for me, a little too theoretical. It was like beyond my understanding, so I couldn't really connect with it. And so I was like, oh, that's cool, you guys have a guru. But I was like totally like not interested. I didn't look into Guru Maharaj or anything back then. I was like, okay, cool. But then what happened was they invited him to their home. So I'd been in the school for 8 months at that point, gung-ho art crazy guy. I mean, absolutely just a total art freak. And so then I heard, okay, Tipurari Maharaj is going to come visit their home. And I wasn't even interested in going. I was kind of like, I'd given up on the idea of finding a guru. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm going to go since I'm hanging out there every night anyway. So anyway, I guess there's going to be a guru as an extra perk or something. But I remember I was really nervous that morning. I think it was more in the morning when then Guru Maharaj and Vrindaranya and one other brahmachari had arrived. And I remember knocking on their door, and Krishnanya opened the door, and I like stepped into their hall. And the way their house is that like when you're standing in the hall, there's one door on the left that's to the living room, and another door to the kitchen on the right. And so I saw Guru Maharaj's feet kind of sticking out from outside of the frame of the door in the living room. And I saw some people, some like monks sitting on the floor. And I quickly slinked to the kitchen. I was hoping they wouldn't see me. I was like, yeah, man, I don't want to, I don't want to like see them basically. And Kamalaksha was there in the kitchen stirring a pot. And he whispered, he's like, go say hi to the guests. I was saying like, no, I don't feel like going. When Kamal actually gets upset, his voice goes falsetto. So he started going like, come on, don't be such a baby, come on. And he's like pushing me. There's another door between the kitchen and the living room. And so he pushed me from my arm through the door to the living room. And of course, I had no idea back then, but that moment was stepping over that threshold from the kitchen to the living room. It was like this like quantum collapse. The kitchen represented like everything that was my past life, the art, the graphic design, hanging out with K&K and just having a blast all the time. And then I stepped into the room that didn't only have Guru Maharaj sitting in this awesome red armchair in the corner, but Vrindaranya was sitting on the floor as well. And so like that was like the point of no return. That was the like decisive fork in my life that changed everything. And so I sat down and paid obeisance to Guru Maharaj and tried to have some small talk, which is like the worst thing for Finns, and I was terrible at it. But anyway, Guru Maharaj was very, very, very nice with me and asked some questions and stuff. And then as we were talking, a bunch of other people from around Western Europe showed up, and Guru Maharaj started talking. And I had all of my guards up, like there was a big wall there between me and him that I put up immediately when I stepped into that room. But I noticed like right away that he was very different than the other gurus I'd met. It's just the way he is, like the way he looks at the philosophy, and like he has this he was apparently was suffering from a really bad jet lag. But I was looking at him, I was like, wow, he's like so calm, like he's speaking so calmly and slowly, but it was actually jet lag. But anyway, that made an impression on me. And so I was like, oh, this person is definitely different than the other gurus. And I was impressed, but I was still totally like standoffish. And so the next day I come back with my discrimination, and I was like studying his every movement. I was like looking at his hand gestures. I was like trying to find some kind of a reason why I shouldn't trust him, but I couldn't come up with anything. And then there was this amazing like decisive moment on the third day when it seriously was like this one moment where it felt like this like veil just like dropped, like all of my apprehensions just dropped off all of a sudden. And I again started like welling up. I was like, because I had that same experience, the exact same feeling I had when Prabhupada's books started hitting me like hardcore. I was like, oh my God, like this person is my guru. And like, because for years, I'd been thinking that I'm never going to get initiated. It was like such a shock to be sitting with him. And then all of a sudden realize this person is my guru. Like I had zero doubt about it all of a sudden that this is it. And the super cool thing about it was that I found out later on that Guru Maharaj was on so many of those walks that were transcribed into that first book that I had. So the way it kind of worked was that Guru Maharaj was there. He was like receiving the Shabda Brahman from Prabhupada. And then decades later, he came to me and basically brought that to me. And it was really an intense experience. And so then from then on, he stayed for 6 days or something. And I was completely blown away. By the end of it, I was just completely sold. I was like, okay, where do I sign up? And he left. He went back to California, and I started counting days for the next time he would come. And the art scene and the bands and stuff, they really just kind of went in the background, and I just started waiting for him to come back. And he actually came back just a couple of days after, no, a couple of months after. Krishnanga and Kamalaksha decided to do this, what do you call it, like a retreat at this island that Kamalaksha's parents had. And so Guru Maharaj came, and it was just amazing, like a whole week of constant like programs and classes and prasadam and hanging out with devotees. It was just like so amazing. And so then Guru Maharaj called me to meet me privately. And so he asked me like, have you ever thought about being a monk? And I said, yes, actually I have. And I was like, oh my God, have I ever thought about being a monk? And he was like really surprised, because I still was sort of in a relationship that I had been in for a long time. And then he said, well, would you like to live with me in Audarya? I was like, hell yeah. I mean, I didn't say it like that, but I said like, sure, yeah, that'd be great. And that's what really, like, that was it. And then he initiated me a couple of days after. There was this, Brigu made this beautiful fire yagya, and there were two other devotees. We all got initiated, first initiation. And he gave me the name Gurunishta, and he wanted me to come to Audarya right away, but I was like, nah, I better wrap things up first. And so I told him I'd come in January, which was a terrible idea, but I had no idea that California winters can be worse than Finnish winters in some way. So I was like, yeah, I'll just come in January. And so then I started prepping to actually become a monk, and I was just totally on fire. Like all the band stuff and my relationship and the art career and being a graphic designer, was like, whatever, I was just ready to go. But then Guru Maharaj, he came back. I guess that's why I wanted to leave in January, because I knew he would be coming back to Finland for the New Year's. He came for another week again by himself. And so I would fly back with him to California when he left. And I'd been the whole 6 months, I'd been just totally on fire. But then when he came, it all of a sudden hit me what I was about to do. Basically, that I was about to burn down my material life. And the whole week he was there, I felt like somebody was like strangling me. I could not get into that devotional mood again that had blown me away so hard before. And I was just, my heart was beating, I was sweating. It was like a week-long panic attack, basically. And then after the week, we're sitting on the plane at the Helsinki-Vantaa airport, and I'm just like dying of anxiety. It was like the most intense anxiety I've ever felt. It really felt like I was dying. And I knew that it actually was what was happening. And materially speaking, I was about to kill myself. And so the plane took off, and I normally never sleep in planes, because I'm a light sleeper. But it was, the anxiety levels were so intense that it knocked me out. I absolutely blanked out, like as if I had been like put out by like before surgery or something. And then Guru Maharaj was sitting like in the window seat, and I was next to him. And so I was completely knocked out. And then I woke up, and Guru Maharaj was gone. And I freaked out. Like, I was like, what happened? What happened? I must have been out for an hour or two or something. And then I turn around and see behind the plane, he's like walking towards me, and it has this like sly grin on his face. And he came to me, and I was like, what happened? And he was like, oh, I tried waking you up, all right, but you were like, I called your name, I was like shaking you, but you wouldn't budge. So I had to jump over you. And I was like, so he had to jump over me in his robes in a full plane. And I was like, well, that was a great start for my monastic life right there. And so that's how it started for me, a full-blown panic, and my guru jumping over me because he couldn't wake me up. And then when we got to San Francisco, it all kind of evaporated because the difference between, you know, Finland in January and San Francisco was just like amazing. Everything was lush and green and beautiful. And so Vrindrana came to pick us up, and we were driving through San Francisco, and I was like going like an owl. My head was just like spinning around. It's like a different world. And like I forgot about all the anxiety because it was so incredible. And then I remember specifically, we were driving over the Golden Gate Bridge, the huge red towers and the whole San Francisco Bay opening on the right, and the Alcatraz there, and a million people out like jogging and whatnot. And all of a sudden I realized, like, I'm actually escaping my karma here. Like I'm breaking out of the prison of my material life. And like these two people had come and like saved me from the prison of material life. And we were like in a getaway car, and I was like cruising away and kind of like in hiding with them. And I had this like intense like burst of joy. Like, I can't believe it. Like, I'm finally like escaping my karma here. And it was just the best feeling. I felt like sticking my head out of the window and just like whooping all the way to Audarya or something. But, you know, I was a very serious monk, so I couldn't do that, of course. So then we got to Audarya, and then of course, you know, the anxiety kicked in again. I was like, what am I doing here? I'm, you know, in the middle of the woods with 4 people I don't really actually know. It was, well, actually 3 people, because it was Guru Maharaj, Vrindaranya, and Chidahari at that time. And it started creeping up again, you know, that like, you know, the chokehold on my throat. And then it just, I mean, the natural setting, if you've been to Audarya, it's absolutely stunning. So it's stunning. So at first I was like extremely impressed by it. And I was just so happy to be here. But then it started like by the evening, by the evening, I was just like freaking out again. And then from there on, it kind of really started hitting me what I had done and everything I'd left behind. Like, everything was kind of happening to me. The band I had started gaining momentum. We were invited to play in Sweden with this like legendary hardcore band called Agnostic Front, and other invites were coming. We had just put out a record that was extremely well received. We had some kind of like a small cult following in Finland of these like fanatical fans. And my graphic design studies were going extremely well. I was like, you know, one of the best students in class and stuff. And I think that was another one of the Krishna's tests. Like, I was kind of right at like about to break through with my material life. And that's when Guru Maharaj showed up, and I threw it out. But when you're actually like, when that happens, when you finally make that break and you try to surrender, that's when you actually only find out how attached you are to things. Because you can't know it when you're in the world. You seem like you're a pretty spiritual guy because everybody else is a total materialist around you. And then you think you're doing great, but then when you're in the environment where the real devotees are, where the real spiritual people are, it's like you realize you're like a maggot. You're like absolutely nothing. And that was starting to hit me. I was like, wow, like I this is way too much for me. I'm not like cut out for this level of surrender. But I pushed through, and so I suffered really hard. And like, so after a few months in the ashram, we started doing the gardening, and it had already been hard for me because we were completely isolated. It was a very pure spiritual program. There was no slack in it. It was just like service and sadhana, and that was it. And so then, but then a whole other level of struggle came when we started doing the gardening, which was, I mean, physically, it was absolutely, I was not used to doing physical labor. And it was just like so hard. We would dig out the whole garden beds, dig them out completely by hand, mix our own soil and throw it back in the, like the sun started really happening, you know, it started getting really hot at that point. And since I was from Finland, I was not used to that kind of heat. And it was so hard for me that I would just go to my yard whenever I could, and I would cry my eyes out. I was like, oh, why is it so hard? God, why are you doing this to me? I can't take this anymore. I'd rather be dead. You know, it's so painful. And then I would like wipe my face, and I was like, I'm not going to show these guys that I'm so weak. And I would go back there. I'm like, I'm going to be just as tough as these guys. And I would like work my butt off. My hands would be shaking. I'd be all like crab red on the head, because of the sun, and then go back in the yurt and cry my eyes out and get back in the gardens. And that was my sadhana. And I basically, I was just talking to Archana about this, or she was mentioning it before we started the call, that how like she felt like she was in the middle of a river and she could see the bank on the other side and the bank where she had left off, and she's just figured, I guess I better just swim through this thing. And that was exactly my experience. I was like, I know what it means to turn around and go back. I know what I'm shooting for, and there's no point in going back, because I have to go through this suffering anyway at some point. So I might as well push through now, and then I'm done with it. And I've created myself a samskar that will enable me to not have these problems in the future. And I don't necessarily recommend that approach to everybody. Like, it's extremely hard, and it can be damaging for sure if it's too much for you. But I guess I was just at the cusp of being able to do that. And then so I pushed through, and I actually was able to do that. But it was extremely hard. I'm not going to lie. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And so then that's how I went forward. And then one thing that happened that was very meaningful to me was that one time when I was having one of the hardest days in ashram so far. And in the evening, me and Chidahari, we were having dinner in the temple kitchen, and we're sitting on the floor and eating these like little packets of like ready-made potato mash, because that's all we had. and I asked him, like, how can you keep doing that? Like how do you control your mind? And he said something that has stayed with me forever since. And he said, well, it's really hard for me. I meditate on this thing that the Alcoholics Anonymous, they have this slogan, and it goes, one day at a time, stay focused and stay centered. And that's when it hit me, like I'm in rehab. This is what the ashram is spiritual rehab. And I'm going through the exact same kind of symptoms. I'm basically going through these massive like heroin withdrawals. And that's why I'm freaking out. There's nothing wrong about me freaking out. It's part of the process. And that's part of the rehab process, is that you vomit your guts out, basically, because that's what you go through in rehab. You get hammered by your addiction. And there's no way around that if you want to face it head on. Like, if you want to butt heads with your material conditioning, you're going to be vomiting your guts out, and it's going to suck. But there's no way that you're not going to have to do that at some point. And so then when I got that like right kind of like orientation that that's what I was going through, and there's nothing wrong with me per se, it really made it so much easier for me. And then he said this other thing that was really important for me too. He said that another thing that the AA says is that I'm not going to be sober for the rest of my life. I'm going to be sober for one day at a time, and then I'm going to be sober the next day and the next day and the next day. And I was like, that's right. I'm not going to be a monk for the rest of my life. It's like, oh, thank God I'm not going to be a monk for the rest of my life. I'm going to be a monk just for one day, and then one day. And that really, you chop this massive blob into these small parts, and then you do that small one part at a time. And that really did it for me. And after that, I still suffered like anything, but at least I had this framework that it was progressive, right? I wasn't just suffering for no reason. And so I did that for 1.5 years, and it was definitely starting to get easier, but I was still getting hammered. And then at that time, we started building the temple in Audarya. And that project was really the thing that brought the focus for me for like service. This idea, Vrindrana had been hammering these points about service to me since I got to Audarya, which I'm like eternally grateful for. She was is my guru in a way of service attitude and surrender. And she's been extremely important for me in the way of understanding the importance of the right attitude and how to serve the guru and how to surrender. So I had this Gyan Samskar, so surrendering didn't come naturally for me. And like surrendering, like giving your heart to somebody, I was more like, grit your teeth and like push through with this like renunciation or something. But she really is all about the heart, and she she's really incredible in so many ways. But that was one of the best things for me that I got from her in the beginning. And so anyway, so we started building the temple, and it was another level of difficulty, and the messiness that Archana-siddhi mentioned, like framed this in interview series with, because I hated construction. I hated everything. Like I was like an art school student, and all that kind of, maintenance stuff, or like being the man who, does the nail gun and the whatever, the skill. So it was like not me. You can ask anybody who knew me before I joined the ashram, like Krishangi, what I was like back then. So like it was extremely hard for me to do service that was not natural for me. But that was one of the things that I learned from Vrindaranya, was that you don't do service like you do service as a service, not something that necessarily is something that you enjoy doing, although it's definitely better if you can combine the two. But at that point, it was based on the necessity that Guru Maharaj had a vision, and we had very limited sources, and we had very limited staff. But we jumped into it because that was the mood back then. We were just like, whatever Guru Maharaj thought we should do, that was his vision. He was trying to serve his gurus, we'd go for it. And so we did, and we started building the temple when we had the worst heat wave of the recorded history of Mendocino County on. So it was 115 degrees outside. And the construction was, of course, in direct sunlight. And we had trenches for the formation or the foundation of the temple. So we were in the trenches digging out the extra soil. And so in the trenches, it must have been at least 10 degrees hotter because the air was stuck there. And the only thing we survived that was, thank God, Chidahari came up with this idea of soaking our t-shirts and hats in cold water every 30 minutes. And that's what we would do. And we were moving like sloths. It was so hot that it was kind of like those videos of the space guys in the moon, but still, like after 30 minutes, the t-shirts and hats were like bone dry, and we'd go back to the bathhouse and soak our t-shirts and hats. And so during that time, this one guy, one devotee, Guru Maharaj had put out this call to the congregation to come and help with the temple, because we were so short staffed. That was just two guys, while Vrindaranya was like running the rest of the ashram, the gardens and the deity worship and cooking and everything with Guru Maharaj, and Guru Maharaj was doing certain things as well. And so this one guy came from Southern California, and one devotee came, and he was more like an office kind of guy, but he probably saw me, and he was like, oh, this guy's, it's like practically a skeleton, so I shouldn't have anything to worry about. He was a skinny guy too. And so he started working with us in the trenches, and I was trying to give him a hat. He was bald. He was, a little older, so he was bald, and I tried to give him a hat, and he was like, no, I'm fine. Sure enough, after a couple hours, his like head was peeling off practically, and he was like shaking in the shade and drinking water, but he had the same kind of like stubbornness in that than I did, and he was just like didn't care. He kept pushing himself, and then the next day he showed up a little later, and he was a little more quiet. And then the third day he was very quiet and showed up very late. And then on the morning of the fourth day, he was supposed to stay for a week. That was the plan. And then we were having breakfast on the fourth day, and he came and he was very quiet. And then all of a sudden his eyes started welling up. He said, I have to leave. And we were like, oh, no, you don't. We were just like trying to say, like, you don't have to work. You can just come and just stay and hang out and chant. But he cut us off. He was like, no, I have to leave. And then he was gone the same morning. And I felt terrible about the thing, of course. But what it really did to me was that I realized that I had become so much tougher. Because in the beginning, I was like, I want to be like Vrindaranya and Chidahari because they were tough as nails. And then all of a sudden, I didn't have anybody to compare myself to other than Vrindaranya and Chidahari. And then all of a sudden, this guy comes who's, physically pretty fit and everything. And he couldn't even stay for a week, although he knew he was going to go back to his, peaceful, convenient, comfortable life in Southern California. And he couldn't stay for a week. And I was like, how dang, like I've been doing this for like 1.5 years. So I finally like realized like I can actually do this if I just keep going. And it was such an amazing like feeling for me, like such a feeling of victory, like, man, like I'm actually tough enough. I was just some art school guy. I was not tough by nature. And then him giving up so fast was really gave me so much like this like sense of empowerment. And then from then on, the temple project kind of like subsumed my focus. Like it was so useful for me to have like one massive devotional project that was so intense and big and had time limits, like deadlines, that I could not think about anything else. It was so all consuming for the ashram that it just completely like grabbed my focus, and it was extremely useful for me. And so then me and Chidahari, we just went at it. I mean, we just worked these like crazy days, which is like in retrospect just nuts, but we had to sort of do it like that, because the thing was that we knew the rains were coming, and we had to get it was July when we started the construction from nothing, and we had to have the structure up and the roof on top of it by November, when the rains would come for 2 guys. And it's 1,500 square foot building with a lot of details. So then later on in the summer, we realized we're totally running out of time. And we started doing these like 12-hour days. And so this was another level of that messiness and the surrender that had to come for us to be able to finish the temple. So we started doing these 12-hour days, 7 days a week for 2 months. And so we would wake up, chant our rounds, get on the construction site at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then work until 7 in the evening when it was too dark to nail or to do anything, to use the skill saw. And we did that every single day for 2 months. And we were so exhausted that like, I don't remember ever being that exhausted. It was just beyond exhausted. Like, and then of course, what happens when you're that exhausted, your mind starts giving you trouble. And so there started being all this tension between us. And I mean, it almost came to blows a couple of times. I'm not going to go into details about that, but if we want to talk about messiness, that would have been pretty messy if we would have actually like duked it out on the roof of the temple construction. Anyway, it got really intense. But we got it done. And then you can imagine what it felt like after 6 months or 5 months of that level of intensity. We have the roof on, and the raindrops start hitting the roof. Like, I think it was 2 days after we got the final panels on. And then it was like, it was such a relief. Like, we were just able to slow down, start working on the insides of the temple. And things, obviously the tensions totally like eased out, and it was all good from there on. And I'm totally running out of time here, so I don't know what I should say more about that, but I guess I'm going to jump a little forward.
Just want to interject how wonderful it is to hear your story like this. It's just, I relate so much to it. I can't even believe how many things in this are like, oh my God, different service and different, but some so relatable. So it's really exciting to hear.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is like with devotees who went for the full, because Guru Maharaj's mission at that time, it was really like almost like an extension of Prabhupada's earlier mission, the way it was back then, like just full surrender, and you just like throw everything at it. And so devotees, I think, who have gone through that, there's really this camaraderie. Like, for example, like I don't, when Chidahari left ashram, I didn't have like a lot to do with him personally for all these years. But every time I meet him, there's just this bond that you can't have otherwise, like, because we went through such insanely intense times. It's the same thing with Maya Purchandra, who I was in Madhuvan with, pioneering through the first rainy season, which was even much more intense than what it was in Audarya. So with those two devotees, and of course, obviously Vrindaranya, because we went through so much with her. I went through so much with her. There's this like very special bond that only comes from that kind of struggle and pushing through these like insurmountable obstacles.
Yeah. So much empowerment actually comes from, that kind of surrender, and it's the benefits and the gems that we receive as a result of having been, almost forcibly placed into situations where we had to surrender. It was do or die. I mean, really, I totally relate to that. There was no going back, and the only way was to go forward. And so.
But one thing I should say in the name of honesty is that you do also pay a price for that kind of surrender. You pay, like my lower back is still messed up.
Yeah.
And I broke it when I was building the temple when we were on a marathon. And you also pay for it psychologically, because it's not like, if you look at the material psychology of a human, it's not natural to push yourself that much. So in that way, you kind of do burn your body and your mind for service. And it has to be your decision if you want to do that or not. Nobody should be forced to do that. But if you decide to go for the full thing, you are going to pay for it. There are going to be consequences. But the way I look at it is like, okay, I've done that now. And I look back, and if somebody asks me like, well, you're a little damaged, Gurunishta. Do you think you would do things differently if if you had a choice? I would say absolutely not. I would never do anything differently. I would do it exactly, well, maybe not exactly, but the main things I would do exactly the same. I would still surrender. I would still do all this stuff. And the thing is, you're going to pay whatever you do in life. There's a price for it. If you have kids, your body is going to get weaker. There's consequences from everything. So then the question becomes like, what do you want to pay the consequences for? So like this idea that material life could, and it can be a lot easier psychologically and physically, but we do pay that price, whatever our choices are. So that's how I look at it, that I would not change a thing because of that.
So what would you like to jump to, since we only have a few more minutes before?
Right. Oh man, there's so much I could be talking about.
I might have to have part 2 with you.
Yeah. I'll say one thing. I kind of had like these 3 devotional explosions in my life. And of course, the first and second were connecting with the devotees through Prabhupada's books, and the second was meeting Guru Maharaj. But the third one was absolutely going to Vrindavan. That just blew my mind in the exact same way. And it was so interesting because my first connection with devotees came through books. My second connection came through personal association with the sadhu. And my third came through the Dham. And it was so incredible. Like when we came to Vrindavan, and I didn't have any, like, I'm not like a sentimental person. So I wasn't like expecting that I was going to see Krishna walking around with the cowherd boys on the street of, Vrindakunj or something. But so I didn't have like these like pre-expectations of having some intense spiritual experiences or something. But so then we came to Vrindavan in the middle of the night. There was Guru Maharaj, Rindaranya, and a bunch of other devotees from California in the car. And so we stepped out of the car. I stepped out of the car to the cobblestone pavement in front of Vrindakunj. And the second I stepped out of the car, there's like this frequency that felt like so familiar. It was the same frequency that I got from Prabhupada's books and from meeting Guru Maharaj. And it was like everywhere instead of just coming from that one point. And it was like overwhelming to me that there was a place on earth that was kind of like a different creation. Like it did not feel like a material location. And then that feeling just like got more and more intense because we had this amazing two-week what do you call it, a retreat with like 50 devotees from all over the world. And so I mean, it was just like the spiritual world. We would have a morning program, a class, prasad, another Guru Maharaj would take us around to all these amazing lila stalis and all these like samadhis and stuff and talk about and give us the right perception of the whole thing, conception. And then we'd have another talk in the evening, prasad. You'd constantly be in the association of devotees. And then the Vrindavan hum was like all around you. And I was just completely like enveloped in this like spiritual vibration. That's how it felt. Excuse me. And and I pushed myself harder than I'd ever pushed that far. It was like I slept like 3 hours because there was so much to do, and I was running, and I had dysentery and the whole thing, but I kept running the whole 2 weeks because I just wanted to stay in that mindset, or that absorption of that Vrindavan mood. And I knew that the way to stay in that was to serve Guru Maharaj as hard as I could, and he needed a lot of service at the time. And then Vrindarani, of course, was constantly like, she was like, especially at that point, she'd become my like spiritual mentor. So she was like keeping me on track, and I was running like mad. And it was the most absorbing devotional 2 weeks I've ever had by far. But the thing was, again, you pay for that. So then by the end of it, we went to New Delhi, and we went to like a hotel to wait for our flight for the next day. And I got to the hotel room, and I just crashed in bed with all my clothes on, my jacket on, my hat on. And I slept for like 4 or 5 hours straight. It was kind of like blanking out in that airplane when I was coming to California. I was just completely out because I was so exhausted, which I hadn't even noticed because it was so absorbing. And so I guess that I'll leave you guys with that, because Vrindavan was like the third explosion that really just kept like hammering on the point that this is not some made up thing. Like this Krishna consciousness, the whatever the current is that is coming down through these certain mediums, and what Guru Maharaj embodies, and what Prabhupada embodies, and what Vrindavan embodies, it's a real thing, and it has a real effect on you. And so I'm just gonna stop there, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so that's really beautiful. And yeah, I mean, it's different devotees have different paths, and some of us have the more intense early days and damage to our physical body. But I wouldn't, like you said, I wouldn't trade it in. If I could go back, and I mean, I did a lot of the damage to myself too, because of the diet and just overeating sweets and those kind of things resulted in some major health challenges. But yeah, just the marathon mood that we all had. But it's die to live. I mean, I totally understand that idea, and it's not everybody's path, but somehow Krishna put you in that, and you have gained great spiritual benefit from it and become a true Sadhaka hero. So
Anti-hero.
What was that?
Anti-hero.
Anti-hero. But it was just really inspiring for me. And I would like to see if anybody on the call would have any questions for Gurunishta. I know when
I don't have a question, but I just really love that. That was so wonderful.
Yeah, you're
really,
one of the
guy. Yeah, but I didn't have as good consciousness as you, unfortunately.
I think I was just,
Thank you so much.
Need to mute, Mahara. Yeah. Anybody have a question? Anyone else want to ask something?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Haribol Kishore.
My name is Gurunishta. I'm wondering how the period or how you were able to transition those kind of from those intense, powerful moments or periods into more steady, regular sadhana without becoming complacent, and kind of like how to keep that, if it's possible to keep that intensity outside of those intense periods.
Yeah, I don't think it is at this level. I think it really is not. And then maybe if you expect it to be that you're able to do that, then it's so disappointing that you might get discouraged. That's what I would say. I do remember, like, for example, we had this East Coast tour with Guru Maharaj. He went to North Carolina for a week and then to the New York area for another week. And it was amazing. It was so exciting for that whole 2 weeks. And then when I came back to Audarya, and this is, I think I've heard it's a common thing for especially temple devotees. So I came back to Audarya and it was back to like scooping poop and, like brushing the toilets. It was just like, it was really hard to get back to, what it's like, right? When you have like a really good festival, for example, that lasts for a long time, and then you're supposed to, after that, go back to the everyday, real like surrender, hands in the mud kind of situation. It's really tough. But I really don't think that you can maintain that intensity. Like, say, like if I would have tried to maintain the intensity that I felt in Vrindavan, I would have absolutely burnt myself out for sure, because it's not maintainable. And then the moments when I had some really strong experiences with chanting or something like that, it's just, we're not at the level where we can actually maintain that. And I don't think we should even try to, because then that's just, it's so disappointing.
Yeah, good question and good answer.
Yeah, very good.
That's a really good answer too. And that's like Krishna's giving us the coming attractions, like Guru Maharaj often says, that those peak experiences. And that's, just to show us what our life will be one day, all the time. But yeah, they're not, it'll come and it'll go. And yeah, sometimes devotees do get discouraged because they have those peak experiences, and then that's what they want all the time. But yeah, we can't be living for that. That's for sure.
Yeah, in a way, you could also say that wanting the peak experiences is a form of sense enjoyment, because you're looking for the bliss instead of looking for service. So that should always be there as well, I think. But of course, it would be nice if we were extremely inspired by our service all the time, by getting that taste. Of course, that's what we want. But like, just as long as the taste, obviously it's a simple point, but as long as the taste doesn't become the main thing that we're after.
Right. And certainly I think that, the taste inspires us to do things that are favorable for Krishna consciousness and to avoid things that are unfavorable. And we do see that when we're, really chanting with, as much focus and attention as possible, and we're doing our service with as much love as we can, that's when those moments will come. I mean, not that we're working just to do, like you said, we're doing it for service, and the attitude has to be, the more that we don't want the taste, the more it comes, actually, when it's so many paradoxes in this process.
Yeah, I do remember one more story. The first time I was in North Carolina at your place, remember 2005, I'd been in ashram only for like 4 months or something. And so I remember asking this question to Guru Maharaj. It was something like, well, since we're supposed to serve and be focused on service, is it actually better for us to do service that we really dislike? And all the older devotees in the room just like burst out laughing. It was a funny moment, because they felt like, oh my God, this guy's so fanatical, But it did end up kind of being like that in a lot of ways. For pretty much my whole brahmachari life, I was doing the kind of service that did not come to me naturally. And I think it's another one of those, I don't use this term too much, but in this connection, I think it's okay. It was kind of like Krishna was kind of like putting me in that situation to test me if I was doing my service for the right motivation. Because my natural tendency, I have that Gyan Samskar, so I'm into like chanting or meditation and studying and that kind of thing. And of course, the artistic, creative side. I wasn't really doing almost any of that. I was drawing the harmonist comics like in the middle of, like in the evenings after my service, when I was about to fall asleep, I was drawing my comics. So that was the only time I had for it. But other than that, I didn't really have the kind of service as much that was natural for me. And but it was extremely useful to learn to appreciate the service itself instead of the form that it comes in. And it was really just based on the necessity of the moment.
Yes, really, really good point. And I think, I mean, I had an experience early on. I think we were talking before we started, and how discombobulated we were in the beginning, and like just having to recalibrate our whole nervous system and everything when you become a devotee. And the only service I could do, honestly, the first like month I was a devotee, was clean the bathroom, and it would take me like so long to do it. I mean, I had been in graduate school, I was pretty competent, and then it was just unbelievable to me. But I did have this really transcendent experience cleaning the bathroom, which stuck with me to this day, of the absolute nature of service. And just it was just mind-blowing, just that spiritual energy that you're talking about, that the experience in Vrindavan and getting the book, that happened in the bathroom.
That's the beauty and the messiness right there, huh?
Right. And I was like, wow, I was quite grateful for that little vision.
That's amazing. One thing about that too, like when I'd been involved with music for like years and years. That was like the hub of my material existence. I was like a band guy, But then I got to Audarya, and Guru Maharaj wanted me to learn to play the mridanga. And it's the same kind of thing, like, because there's this huge like kind of like fracture between your material identity and the spiritual identity that's just budding. You try to like kind of like cultivate. I could not get into playing the mridanga, although I was a drummer. I started when I was 12 and I got into the band stuff. I was a drummer, so that should have been like the most natural thing for me to play the mridanga, because the drumming was not in the context of me expressing myself as a drummer, I had no taste for it. And actually it was extremely hard for me to learn to play it. And it was such an incredible experience that the thing that like informed my childhood and youth, I couldn't do in the devotional context because I didn't have the right service at it.
Yeah, and so much of those, so many of the situations that Krishna puts us in are just to help us to be able to have that service attitude. And it's it's the ego effacing and stripping, material stripping, and attachments being taken away, and the anxiety that I had identical like panic attack after I came to the ashram, and I was like, I knew I had to be there. I knew it's what I needed to do, but the panic attack, that it was actually turned into a little fire where I felt I was being consumed in this fire. And the only thing that would make the fire go out was for me to say, okay, Krishna, I'll stay. I'm not going to go anywhere. So it's not an easy, but Krishna somehow, I think, that he drags it. Not everybody. I guess we would be grateful that somehow we got dragged into it. All of us that are
right.
Krishna didn't let us go.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one more thing that came to my mind from that is that but then so I had like these extremely intense long periods of service that I was right at the brink of snapping. But then all of a sudden there was like a windfall or something that was just all of a sudden like, wow, things were working great. And I got that little breather. It's like, Krishna took my head like above the, bhakti rasamrita sindhu, and then back down, and then like, oh, I'm like gasping for air. And then again, he lifts it up just to get enough air to go down again. I mean, and it is extremely purifying. And I guess that it's hard to like think like, what is Krishna like? What is his plan? Why does the system work like this? It seems very brutal from the sadhaka's point of view. Like, why does it have to be so hard? Why does it have to be so brutal like that. But the thing is, like, there is clearly some kind of pattern, because so many devotees who have really tried to surrender, they have the exact same experiences. And so there clearly is a system, the way it works. And then you're just trying to be kind of, I guess that's part of the surrender, that you don't try to figure it out with your mind so that you can avoid the bad times and take the good times. You can't calculate. It's just, you try to surrender, and then you have to sort of take whatever comes, although it's very unpleasant in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think that's the one of the gifts of doing these interviews, is so that, you know, I mean, I've heard devotees say things like, I feel like Krishna's punishing me. I feel like this is, you know, Krishna doesn't like me. I mean, I had a client last week that had this whole litany like that. But it's just the opposite. I mean, it's Krishna he sees the whole big picture, and he's, you know, it's like doing some kind of, you know, spiritual surgery on us, you know, removing all these, you know, these material parts of us. And because we're attached, it feels, you know, it's so painful because of our attachment. And
Right.
it's just, yeah, it's really, it's such a gift. And so to hear that, you know, just like the hero's journey, I mean, every hero becomes great because of the adversity he goes through. And so
pain,
yeah, it's the more of that there is, the more, you know, in the end, the greatness comes out. And so sadhakas are just, that's where we're on a hero's journey. It is a very special hero's journey. And we have and what we're getting, you know, is so far greater than what, you know, Harry Potter gets at the end of, you know, you know, I don't know, I never read Harry Potter, but I'm sure that follows the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey kind of thing.
Yeah.
What we get, I mean, we're getting eternal life, no more suffering. The suffering is over. So we have this one, you know, this life, or maybe 3 more lives, you know, whatever, very short little time frame of, you know, having to go through the mill to, you know, but then it's finished eternally. We'll just be in that spiritual energy, living in it, you know, breathing it all the time. So
yeah, one thing that came to mind when you said about your client saying that, wondering if Krishna is punishing her or him, I always loved that one example that Prabhupada used to give, that like when a baby is having, you know, you feed milk to it, or her or him, and then he starts having like stomach problems, and then you hit it on the back, you know. And so like that's really what it is. Like, we have this extremely like limited frame of reference of what's good and what's bad, and what's good for us and what's bad for us. And so like then it's like, oh, Krishna is punishing me, but maybe he has you on his shoulder and he's like patting that milk to come out or whatever. He's trying to make you puke, you know, to get that stuff out of you. So like it's really detrimental in some ways to try to speculate what Krishna is trying to do with us. Like, why is he making us suffer? Like, obviously, if we trust the fact that Krishna is the embodiment of like mercy and goodness and all these qualities, like this amazing like embodiment of everything that is actually good, why would he punish us? I mean, it's there's no room for that kind of thing.
yeah, and yeah, everything. I mean, to actually be able to see, if we develop that vision that everything that's happening is just perfect for what I need, and it's love. It's done with the utmost love. I mean, for the sadhaka, and then for the siddhas too. The siddhas go through their what looks kind of messy too. They have their messiness, but it's always to increase the love, and it's never. I mean, it's an eternal, never-ending process. So yeah, so even in the spiritual world, we're going to have the messiness. So put your seatbelts on. We're in this forever now. Anyway, Gurunishta, I just thank you so much. That was a delightful, just totally delightful interview.
Likewise.
And I didn't have to do much, which was great. So
Wait, are you trying to avoid service there?
yes, I'm definitely a service avoider. So next week, who do we have? Is it Mahara next week? Yeah, Mahara's next week. So that's
Great.
going to be, that'll be I'm sure, an exciting interview. I've known Mahara for many years and watched her, the messiness and the beauty of her life. So I'm excited to have her be on. And yeah, and we have some other nice devotees coming on next month too. We have Madan Gopal and Sakirati. And I don't know, I haven't heard from Kishore Krishna yet. I'm expecting, I hope you got my email. Did you? You didn't get my emails? No, are you serious? You don't get email. I've sent you.
I'm not lying. I didn't get any email. Maybe it's in my spam.
Oh man, well, I'm glad I asked you. I just thought, man, you're just like really avoiding me. Okay, well,
I have a question. Can I ask a question or it's too late?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions. One for Gurunishta and one for Archana-siddhi. And Gurunishta, I would like to know if you have a kind of goal that, of course, we talk about service and everything, but in a level of consciousness, like in this life, if you have a goal or you think about something.
Yeah, that's really a cool way of looking at it. Like, kind of not just randomly try to go forward, but have some kind of like intermediate goals. Guru Maharaj used to say when we were younger brahmacharis that it's good to try to shoot for nishta. And that in itself is like a high level. And so I've like studied the different levels and kind of like in the light of thinking about where I'm at myself. And even nishta seems like an extremely high level, that you would be at that level of purity where you're not really pulled by anything anymore and you're just fully focused. So I would definitely say that's what I'm shooting for, but I don't know if I'm going to be there, but it doesn't really matter in some ways. That it's a nice interim goal. And so I'd say let's go for nishta, Gurunishta.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I was wondering, Archana-siddhi, if someone could interview you one day in your series.
Actually, Madan Gopal said he would like to do it. So I don't know if he was serious about that, but maybe we can make that happen.
Okay.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be fun. I would like that. Although I share a little bit here and there with all the interviews, so probably everything that I would say will have come out by that time. So maybe I don't need to be interviewed. See,
I bet there's so many things that would come out. We should definitely do it.
Sounds good. All right. Well, the series has been really enlivening for me, and just love getting to know all of you more. I mean, I had Gurunishta at my house for a week or I guess about a week, and I was always asking him questions, but he was pretty shy back then, you know. So
yeah, I've been fully Americanized by now. I remember I'd been at her house just for a couple of days, and Karnamrita came up to me and he grabbed me like this around my neck and started rubbing my chest. He was like, "How you doing, buddy?" And I was like, "Whoa." For a Finn, that was like serious like breaching of personal space, but I actually really ended up appreciating it. Karna was just like so warm like that. It was so wonderful.
Nice. Yeah. Well, it's like that first devotee that you met that was on the bike.
I got to.
He grabbed your bike.
Yeah, the really cool little detail is that his name is Agathira. And that's like a total Sakyaras name. And I can just see he's like from the Madhu Mangal group. He's this like chubby, happy guy, you know, perfect fit.
Stay away from those Sakyarats. All right. Well, we'll Kishore, look for an email. I'm going to resend it again, and hopefully, if you don't get an email, then write me back because something's wrong. I've sent, yeah, something's wrong. So check your spam, check your whatever. Okay. Jai, Hare Krishna. We'll see
Haribo.
everybody soon.
No, but you don't.
Oh.
Haribo.